Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third episode in season 2 of the HT Dialogues. Bullying is a problem that can derail a child's schooling, social life, and emotional well being. The issue has gained attention once again because of pandemic induced exposure to devices and technology, and hence new ways to communicate and harass one another over the internet, on mobiles, and social media. Sometimes kids feel like it's their own fault, and if they looked or acted differently, it wouldn't be happening to them. Often, they're scared that if the perpetrator finds out that they have told others, it could get worse. A few others are worried that their parents won't believe them or do anything about it. As children were confined to their homes in the pandemic, several parents reported a range of behavioral changes they witnessed in their children. From mood and sleep to cognitive alterations, parents saw children undergo many changes, which they fear will now be expressed through negative activities like bullying, especially in adolescence. Recently, many parents reached out to us at the Hindustan Times and requested us to conduct a discussion on how to prevent bullying caused by behavioral changes triggered by the pandemic. As per the Center of Disease Control, students who experience bullying are at an increased risk of depression, anxiety, sleep difficulties, lower academic achievement, and dropping out of school. As per the National Center for Education Statistics, 41% of students who reported being bullied at school indicated that they think it could happen again to them. Today, we are happy to present this discussion on bullying among students in school. Through this live session, it is HT's attempt to get answers to a whole lot of questions we have been receiving regarding anxiety buildup among students and parents with respect to bullying. I'm honored to have a dynamic panel of speakers today. It is my pleasure to introduce all our guests on the panel. Dr. Sameer Parekh is an eminent psychiatrist and has played a significant role in enhancing the image and reach of mental health across the country. He is the director of Fortis National Mental Health Program. Dr. Parekh has instituted the Bharat Panchal Award for the best young researcher in the field of psychology. Welcome, Dr. Parekh. Dr. Ashok Pandey is director, Alcon Group of Schools, former chairperson of NPSC, and is a recipient of several awards for his contribution and innovations in the academic community. Among his many other assignments, he also sits on the governing body of the National Council of Teacher Education. Welcome, Dr. Pandey. Dr. Amrita Vora, with over 25 years of transformative work in education, is currently serving as Director Education GEMS Education India and Executive Principal GEMS International School Gurgaon. She is a certified program leader for Cambridge Professional Development Qualification for teachers and school leaders. Welcome, Dr. Vora.
Thank you.
Dr. Nilakshi Roy is the spokesperson of the Swikar Rainbow Parents Group. She is a retired head of Department of English, KET, VG Vaze College, Mumbai. Welcome, Dr. Roy.
Thank you for having me. A very good afternoon, all of you.
I would like to start by asking you, Dr. Parekh, to help us set the context. What all comes under bullying among school children, whether it's verbal, physical, or mental? If you could talk to us about it.
All of it, actually. One needs to understand this, that any transgression that is happening, where one person, this is essentially an imbalance of power, so as to say. So one person in this equation, one individual feels lack of power, and another individual or group of individuals feel in a power position. And these people, whether it is verbal, whether it is physical, whether it is in terms of cyber as well in modern day times, and I do feel we need to understand cyberbullying as well is as harmful as what happens in our physical premises. Any of these modalities which are happening where the consent is not there, something which is a transgression of boundary happening is all would be a part of bullying.
We cannot hear you,
Um,
Rupali.
You're muted.
Thank you for the detailed explanation, Dr. Parikh. Acknowledging bullying in school students and being informed, I guess, is the first step before being able to identify any red flags in a victim or in taking the right steps to mitigate or prevent the issue. And of course, get to the right reason behind it. So let's have a discussion in detail as we go one by one. Dr. Roy, we've heard of many incidents about bullying in the past, and now too we do here among school students. Is there any incident in particular which you would like to share with us today?
Yeah, among the many incidents, as you're saying, I think it would be most relevant to discuss an incidence of cyberbullying. Actually, I will give you two incidents which kind of suggest a kind of a progression in the whole scheme of things. One about a school student who went to a new school and was a very successful person in her own right. But at the new school, she faced bullying to such an extent that she was not aware that all kinds of details about her and wrong details, details which she did not want or was not even a party to or aware of, are being shared online, were circulated among the new schoolgoers who were not her friends as yet. But she was labeled as a kind of a person who is easily available sexually, and all kinds of content was circulated about her, which completely hit the roof, and the child was under extreme psychological duress. And this went on for a long time without her awareness. And when things came to light, it was probably too late. So this is one example. Then, of course, her parents stepped in and took the right, steps. The school was informed, and all kinds of retributory steps were taken. But the psychological damage is probably still under repair. Um, Another incident which happened in my college was about a young student who was a new entrant, who was again available now on the internet, sharing all kinds of details about himself. This time it's a boy. And he was cyberbullied in a very, very strange way. And it was a very sad consequence. So he was bullied by another boy who took on the identity of a girl and promised love and everything. And they had texts with a lot of, and chats with a lot of sexual content, and all kinds of things happening online. And then, of course, these were again leaked to the entire school, the college environment. And ultimately, the boy committed suicide. He came from a very middle class family, and he had absolutely no clue as to what was going on in his life, which was no longer private. So there are these kinds of consequences, which are extremely disturbing and distressing. And if not contained early, bullying can lead to extreme crimes.
What you
I have just give me a second. I'll speak here. Since we've talked about suicide, and just mentioning this, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, 10 September is the World Suicide Prevention Day, right? And we all need to understand one thing, that sometimes we see suicide in the context of what we believe could have been a trigger, but it's important to understand suicides are preventable. And when we talk about suicides, we must simultaneously also talk about helplines available. So anybody and everybody listening here, there are helplines, government helplines, private helplines. Reach out to someone. If you are struggling, if you've been bullied, if you are struggling in any which way, please reach out to an expert, talk to a senior, open up with your parents. And we all need to ensure that when we talk in terms of death by suicide, our role needs to be very, very clear, that suicides are preventable, right? And it's important that we set in this aspect here. The other thing that I want to mention is, please be very clear when we talk about bullying, that every time we talk about incident A or incident B, fact of the matter is, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. The hundreds and thousands of bullying which happen at multiple levels are happening, and then we come to know of one or two incidents because
Sure.
they may bring a shock and awe in us. Right? Bullying is not about shock and awe. Bullying is not about that it needs to cross a certain limit or a boundary for adults around us to wake up and think about it. Bullying could be as simple as children in a primary school also not talking to a kid or a group of kids and making a group in mere isolation. That is also bullying, right? It could be something as simple as a comment that is passed on somebody's social media profile. It could be a trolling comment here. It could be a comment on somebody's background and so on and so forth. So let's understand this. Whereas I
Sure.
understand that when we have this conversation, we want to also look at that, what one has seen. I don't think shock and awe is an approach to bullying that really works. We need to understand the reality. WHO report you mentioned yourself is very, very crystal clear on this. Bullying in schools is one of the significant trigger factors correlated with adult mental ailments, right? And the impact is obvious here. So that's why I think our approach needs to be accepting that it is there in every school, in every classroom, in every possible nook and corner of our system. Rather than saying, I am bully free, nobody's bully free. We
True.
don't live in a bully free environment. And then the next approach should be, what should we do?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Parekh, on that because very important to acknowledge that most schools, most places, and not only schools, even offices are bully. There are zones in offices. There are bosses who bully, there are peers who bully, and we've all gone through it. And thank you again for highlighting that. We have this helpline, and we will surely also towards the end of it take that number and put it out on our message here also for students and everybody else who's watching this. And like you said, yes, it is preventable, and if in actioned in time, definitely. And Dr. Roy, what you shared with us was extremely heartbreaking, breaking, and disappointing at the same time. Witnessing all this just reiterates that bullying is still such a matter of concern, and it has been there for years together. Dr. Pandey, I would like to ask you that CBSE has set a set of stringent guidelines they have issued to schools for prevention of bullying. What could be the obstacles in preventing an incident? How do the school administrators then tackle that?
Yeah, but this is very important, Rupali, and I think a lot of that Dr. Parikh has already indicated. The whole problem is that we are talking of bullying as an incident or as an event, which has shaken the community or whatever it is. I think we have to take it a school-wide approach to this whole thing, and it
Sure.
is part of the larger disciplinary, issues on a campus, and therefore. In the light of that circular also, I mean, to say that I will prevent a fight or prevent a fire, I mean, that is one thing, that is fine, that's very good. But what I would suggest here is taking a cue from what Dr. Parikh has said, that a school-wide and a proactive approach.
Hmm.
These two are the key words. Now, what does it mean is that every school should have some kind of a policy. What are the boundaries between the acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior? There should be a desired behavior, undesired behavior, clearly known to everybody. And it should be practiced consistently across the school. And the children and anybody who is part of that ethos and culture system should know what are the consequences of misbehavior. We should also, good behavior should be connected with the larger purpose of education on the campuses, that bad behavior prevents your own performance, your own growth. It creates insecure atmosphere on the campus. And therefore, I think what is very, very important is a very fair, a very clear, and a very consistent communication and articulation of all these things into the school's manual or vision statement. Dr. Roy mentioned that thing, a student coming to a new school. Now imagine, I mean, should schools not have as part of their policy that how to induct a new child, how to include that child in your
Sure.
system, which the child coming to is alien to, so how the children should welcome, how they should make it comfortable, how a buddy should be appointed, how a teacher mentor should be appointed. I think these are the proactive preventive measures that we all have to keep in mind, and I can
Sure.
elaborate upon it as we go further.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pandey. I definitely like this whole bit of, having a school-wide and proactive approach, being consistent in your communication, welcoming these students, and yeah, it's of utmost importance that the child feels safe, whether he is a new entrant or an existing student or any class or section he belongs to. Because after all, school is the second home for a child. They spend actually really
Absolutely.
more awake time in the school than they had spent at home, frankly. Yeah. Dr. Vora, while early detection in classrooms can help contain the situation, and I'm sure that's a part of the policy also, or at least we think of it so. Bullying can often be subtle, and a teacher herself might not be able to recognize an issue in her classroom. Are our teachers trained to spot these incidents, or what is it that goes behind training these teachers?
Yeah, so good question. And just taking a cue from what Dr. Pandey already said, that we have to have proactive approaches and school-wide approaches, and things have to be defined in policy. So just like for a child, there has to be a defined process which puts out this is how the child will be inducted in the new place. So does a teacher. A teacher also within the induction process before they get into any classroom have to be well aware of what these policies are. So does the parent need to be well aware. So every stakeholder actually plays a role in the entire process. A lot of bullying, as Dr. Parekh also pointed out, happens online. A child may end up saying something or trolling or saying something negative online, and these days a lot more happens online. Children know Snapchat to disappearing messages to a whole host of things, and they use anything and everything. It may not happen within school premises, it may happen at home sometime in the night or whenever, but eventually a child feels hurt, and that child very often we've noticed doesn't open up to parents about certain things, but they do come up and talk to the school counselor, or they do come up and talk to the teacher. It's important for them to get that sense of comfort, that sense that I can voice my opinion, I can voice my feeling. And when they actually voice, sometimes they've done something, sometimes they've written something negative for another child, they have bullied someone, and they come and talk because they realize, not all of them, but sometimes they do realize, okay, what I did wasn't okay, but why did I do it? Very often we find that children are not being able to really think. They act on the spur of the moment. Social media is making them feel that I have to act right now. Something happened, I didn't like what this person did to me, so I'm going to react, and in an angry mode I write something very very negative, which I later, probably when I get a chance to think, I feel that okay, this wasn't okay. This room for error is not available, unfortunately, to our adolescents today. They used to have fights earlier too. They would say they would patch up also. Today, they end up saying it on media, which makes it public before they realize. And it's very instant. So it doesn't give them that opportunity to pause and consider what they're going to do. So these are things, therefore, that require very proactive measures and very clear policies, and social emotional learning, mental health, and well being have to be at the center or in the mainstream of education. They cannot be just one of the things that we also do as a school. They have to be really, really mainstream. Just as we consider maths, English, science, or whatever the so called core subjects, this is the most important. And that has to be done at all stakeholder levels together.
Yeah, so policy sometimes can just remain in books. I personally feel, I'm sure, if we practice things like, and I'm sure schools are doing, so what I'm also looking for is that maybe your teachers are creating assignments or activities that help students bond, create a sense of belongingness for their peers, connect them together, so that
May I just Yeah, from that point of view, like we have a peace corner or a peace table in every classroom. There are also corridor peace areas and silence tables and reading corners and all those things. But the idea is also that teachers know and the students know and the parents and of course the counseling team knows that emotional intelligence is a very, very key aspect. And if I'm feeling weird about anything, not okay about anything, one, I can go and talk, or I can just sit here and reflect. If I feel that I need to have a discussion with a friend or somebody who's maybe isolating me or said something that I did not like, I can request for a peace table conversation, as we call it. It's
Yeah.
just a conversation, and a lot is we are able to resolve through that. Sometimes, of course, like sir said, that defined acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior, that has to be very, very clear. So that is of course there, and sometimes further action is required. So those have to be clarified, and data is very critical. A lot the school comes to know, the teacher comes to know through a lot of small little things that go around,
Yeah,
anecdotal and
that's
yeah.
really the thing that I'm talking about, because if teachers can connect well with students, students connect very well with peers, and there is that little hitch in, being a bully or troubling anyone. Plus, of course, the students should have the confidence that teachers will swiftly respond to whatever they spot. Plus, or if the students reach out to them. Plus, building that kind of assurance that if a teacher is or a counselor is spoken to, will be the confidant of both the affected parties or the students without being judgmental. I'm sure these things are happening, but I just wanted to highlight these. Looks like Dr. Parekh, you want to add something. Is there something that you want to speak about?
What is the number of schools in our country?
Sorry. Okay.
Question to all of you. What is the number of schools in our country? Give me a number.
1.5 million.
Right.
1.5 million.
How many counselors there in India?
Far lesser.
How many counselors are there in India?
You will be able to give us that number, Dr. Parekh.
500% shortage. What are we talking about?
Yeah. But sir, my response to that is that every teacher is also counseling a child.
That's
Every
not true.
teacher has a
Sorry, that's
relationship.
not. Sorry, ma'am, not true. It's like saying that all parents are counselors, not true. All teachers are counselors, not true. That's undermining the specialist branch. My
No,
point to say what I,
specialist
my
is
point.
required.
No, ma'am. I think expertise is expertise. We can't undermine it. All developing countries are struggling with numbers. The WHO report is quite obvious in that there is an inequity and inequality about expertise worldwide, and that's something that needs to be addressed. My point to ask this question was very limited. I'm endorsing the fact that we have to work with the parent-teacher community, and yes, the luxury of having a counseling program is limited if we are honest to ourselves with some schools. Most schools would struggle to have one full-time counselor. So many more will have no, or maybe have someone or the other. And when I'm talking about schools, I'm including all schools from public, private, and so on and so forth. Right? Why I'm saying this is I believe that yes, the teacher community for the school space and the overall adult community for the non-school space both have a role to play. And I do agree. In fact, I believe that giving the teachers the skill set and training, like you all were saying, when it comes to mental health is now becoming increasingly important.
Sure.
I've not met an educationist who would not agree to this. At the same time, when we look at our educational system, and you all would agree to that, our approach to mental health is a little bit as compared to our approach overall. And that continues to be a concern for us. And like you were talking about, ma'am, while you were talking about when you talked about mental health, we need to be very pragmatic and we need to have a solution focus when it comes to some of the aspects of our life. I mean, I can go on and on about what all needs to happen for mental health,
You know,
right?
Rupali, can I come in here?
Sure,
Rupali?
sure, Dr. Pandey. Please go ahead.
So while I respect and I agree to every word that Dr. Parikh has spoken, I would submit in all humility that we are discussing about the discipline and bullying problems. We are not discussing about mental health problems. Are we saying that all bullying cases are born out of mental health problems? I don't think
No,
that is
sir.
the case.
Bullying
That
is
is
the
not the
single
case.
largest. No, sir.
You see,
Bullying is the single largest cause of mental health concerns coming out of schools. WHO report 2022.
that is true. But you see, when we talk of children from class 1 to class 12, out of all the problems that we have on the campus, including bullying, they are something which has to be dealt with the schools. And no school can afford to have a very specialized counselor. And in any case, for very difficult cases, counseling services are provided with the experts. But what we should focus on here is, in addition to the needs that Dr. Parikh is highlighting, that there are means and ways to develop a culture on the campus. If you don't develop that culture, we will only be chasing a particular disease or a problem. Even that disease has 100 counselors. If the culture is not there, if there is a method not there, if there is a data collection not there, if every school does not ask themselves, what are our knowledge, value, and beliefs about discipline? Are we prepared to handle the discipline problems? Are our children feeling safe on the campus? I think these questions need to be answered by the people who are working in the schools. That is the submission I'm making.
So I
Yes,
guess
sir. When we talk about
I wanted
when we
to say
talk about
something.
one
mental
minute,
health,
Dr. Roy, 1 minute. Let Dr. Parikh complete.
when
One
we
second.
talk about mental health, let's understand this. Mental health comes into the picture in terms of impact of bullying. Some amount of mental health comes in the picture in prevention as well, because when you look at the mental health curriculums that are established worldwide, including what we've written, a well-being approach to classroom is integral to it. And I absolutely agree to the fact that school counseling by itself cannot be and is not a solution to bullying. And that's these need to be, there is a support system, yes, that counselors can provide. But to say that a mere presence of a counselor will actually end up taking bullying away is not going to happen.
No, so Dr. Parikh, I think that's not what Dr. Vora
One more
was.
aspect that we must need to understand when we talk about bullying, we must understand the role of environment in bullying, because a lot of times we tend to be overcritical about school or educational systems. They are also living in a milieu here, right? So I'll give you two examples to understand this. You look at sports, and we actually celebrate aggressive behavior of sports athletes on the field, which clearly is unacceptable. If the same behavior was done by a school student of grade 8, grade 9 in a school, they'll be reprimanded, and we celebrate when an athlete does it. Similarly, the kind of trolling, abusive language that is there in on online media, where a lot of young people are there, we are actually creating this aspect. And third aspect is, a lot of times in the so-called reality television or entertainment television, we celebrate in various ways meanness, abusiveness, and bullying behavior. Children are exposed to so much that when we talk about bullying prevention, we need to understand that giving skills to be able to navigate the environmental aspect also is a part of anti-bullying, not merely what a school can do, because it's also a societal response here and societal responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. Parekh and Dr. Pandey well said, of course, schools cannot have the entire ecosystem or support to have a professional counselor on campus. But yes, of course, creating an entire culture where school students are welcome, are not afraid of sharing, sharing what they are going through. Plus, of course, teachers getting trained, and the school students at least being able to talk to teachers. And then it is up to the teachers and the administrators to figure out that, if that can be handled at school level, or the parent needs to, of course, definitely be involved. And the parent needs to consult an external counselor, So that's something that can be, of course, looked at, or I'm sure the schools are doing that. Dr. Parekh, in continuation to that, we know pandemic has triggered, and you've already mentioned it, psychosocial changes in children, and there is too much exposure and dependency on technology now, Is it playing out among students with a surge in cyberbullying? I mean, do you see increased cases being reported in the clinic that you deal with these days now?
Yes. A very simple answer would be yes.
So what? Sorry.
Like I said, try and understand this. Like I said, you need to understand this. Reporting and actual experience, unfortunately, are poles apart if you look at reality. Second aspect, what we see typically would be when a student is already struggling, may have had an academic concern, may have had a social concern, which means is withdrawn or not being with friends, may have had a psychosomatic concern, headache, pains, sleeplessness, appetite concerns, may have had a behavioral concern, outbursts, irritability, or withdrawn. Various manifestations happen, and when they would come to us and when we start exploring, we may realize that there was also a bullying experience. Bullying cannot, I mean, it doesn't sometimes need to be direct as well. Sometimes what happens is, let's say you may be online, your friend is also online, and you saw someone pass a comment or write something, or you are in a school premise and you see happening to a third party, and you feel, what if this happens to me? There are these various components which are there with bullying, and yes, online bullying sadly has gone up, which is unfortunate. The fact that internet could have also been used as a place of abuse, if somebody would have told me 20, 25 years back, one would have probably never believed it. But this is a sad reality, and I don't think we can deny it. Social media platforms are also trying to do their bit, but I think the problem that we have is just cross our ability to do much, because the external locus in terms of who uses an anonymous handle and ends up saying what, and the bots of the world, and it's just an endless maze out there. And when it comes to the online component, you need to split this in two parts. Part one, when you've been bullied by someone you know. Part two, when you've gone through negative experience by somebody you do not know. Now, the second one is more about building your resilience. The first one hurts a lot because it affects your sense of security. Like what was being said earlier, it affects your safety. And safety security has to be the first aspect for any premise, be it a playground at home, be it your RWA, be it a school, be it a college, be it a workplace, where the individual needs to feel confident so that they can perform, flourish, grow, make relationships. And that's how one needs to look at it. And we've been working on bullying for a while. For the past few years, we've been doing this initiative called Bully to Buddy. And we've been making anti-bullying squads in schools. I believe, for one, that we need to have layers in solution. One top solution is obviously policy, vision statement, absolute fair processes, which would also include data and what we do about it. Then in terms of creating an environment, the kind of messages that we use through schools, through teachers, through parents, creating a bully-free environment perception. Then comes obviously what teachers will do, what counselors will do. But the core to bullying solution is in peer relationships.
Sure.
If your peer relationships can be worked upon, which is life skills, which is social communication skills, value education cannot be not discussed, because we keep talking about science and this skill set and that skill set. Values is the core here, because if I have values, I will feel hurt if you are hurt. And if I am hurting you, I'll be bothered. So that aspect as well. And this is where peer role comes. So when you have both peer related approaches, so for example, when ma'am was talking about the peace table, 3 students using the peace table will make 10 more students use it, no matter how much the teacher says.
Sure.
3 or 4 senior students doing it is how it will start. Similarly, a bullying, anti-bullying squad and peer-related communication continuing, where peers encourage, talk, speak up, unmute yourself. It is this aspect of bullying which has to be acted upon while we create the larger framework and work within our limits. We can do what we can do in our ecosystem, which is more structured, which is schools and colleges and workplaces. And we can't do what is happening in the environment. And that's where you again prepare children for navigating life. Now, this broad approach is something that needs to be done when it comes to working with bullying.
Nice. I like the layered approach that you've suggested, and the whole emphasis on peer relationships. I think that's critical I was also going to ask, but we are losing time, a lot of it. Is does digital citizenship, some kind of courses in that, you think, is that a joint responsibility of school and parents now? Because cyberbullying is not something that's restricted only to schools now. We can't just pin the schools to ensure that the students are educated or given educated in digital citizenship. I would assume it should be a joint responsibility of parents. And so I will skip the question on this one right now. Dr. Parik, my next question is again to you. Do you did highlight in your last talk that there are certain red flags that the parents could watch out for. You did mention what kind of reactions or how students behave, insomnia, lack of sleep, lost, etc. Are there anything in particular that you would want our parents to know, that what are the things that they should watch out of? And in continuation to the same question, I'm very keen to know, because often we think my child could be getting bullied. It could be the other way around. My child could also be a bully to their peers. So what kind of goes on in the mind of such a child, and how could a parent spot either of the cases? That my child could be getting bullied, or could be a part of the bullying squad. And what are the red flags, if you could quickly sum up those?
So honestly, it would not be specific to bullying, to be honest, right? It's more to do with distress when it comes to the victim of bullying. I'll come to the bully separately. Now, when an individual goes through distress, now the distress can happen because of various reasons. That is what will come in conversation later on. What will be distress? Distress happens, let's say, at your lifestyle level, which would be sleep getting impaired, appetite being affected, as an example. At psychosomatic, I mentioned lots of pains, aches, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, some of those aspects. Then it will come at an emotional level: sadness, crying, irritability, anger. It will come at behavioral level: withdrawn or irritated. It will come at a social level: change of social circle, sudden change of friends, withdrawing from people, withdrawing even at home, hesitant to do things one was doing earlier. Then it also comes at an expression level, which is the thought being expressed, where sharing, not liking, not enjoying, some of these aspects. And if you see this happening, and performance level, sudden deterioration of academics. Now, what happens is, if as a parent or as a teacher, you feel any of these one or two have come together, they're consistent for, let's say, a period of 10 days, 15 days, this is when you sit, have an open-ended, non-judgmental conversation. Child may not speak on day one, may speak on day three. Don't push, don't be critical, don't blame. This is something we also call psychological first aid. Look, which means identify the signs. Listen, not speak, listen. And then link to a solution. These are three steps of psychological first aid. That's what one needs to do. Frankly, the similar can also happen to the individual who's bullying. Their performance, their relationships also get affected, because a bully is also like an aggressor. Aggressors struggle to make meaningful relationships. Aggressors also struggle with academic performances. Why I'm saying this is, at least at a school level, we need to appreciate both the bully and the bullied need help. They need to be given attention and help, rather than looking at the why behind it. We need to look at the how to solve it, giving children skills, empathy, and problem solving, which means when there is an issue, they do something. Peer communication, teacher communication, good relationship between teachers and parents go a long way for children to be able to open up.
Sure, sure. Thank you. I think that should really help the parents and the teachers too. Dr. Pandey, we already discussed teachers and principals have the difficult task of communicating. The signs that Dr. Parik just mentioned to us, and I'm sure your teachers are picking those up in the classrooms. I'm sure there are some challenges in communicating this to the parents, because parents' first reaction is, my child couldn't be, he's absolutely normal at home. How could my child be a bully or be getting bullied? So what are the challenges in communicating this to parents, and how do they react, and how do you deal with these kind of discussions? Dr. Pandey?
Mr. Pandey is not there on the screen anymore.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think he's.
So I will take the next question in the meantime, Dr. Vora, with you, and we'll have Dr. Pandey join back. Do schools conduct any kind of surveys at regular intervals to keep a check on bullying and particularly now when the students are back to understand their, how, are they experiencing any kind of bullying, or what is their, how are they behaving after these 2 years of life altering experience that they've gone through?
Yeah. So I cannot vouch for all schools here, but
Sure.
definitely some schools who are thinking on these lines and or are being made to think because of this, because of the actual circumstances that we see every day, are looking at, as I earlier said, mainstreaming the idea of social emotional learning, mental health, and well-being. Why so? And when it comes to surveys, and I earlier also emphasized on data, data is critical. Just as we talk of a lot of things now, a lot of this data cannot be based on only anecdotal evidences or only whatever a teacher has observed. There the expertise of the trained clinical psychologist or the counseling team comes in. So a lot of these test batteries which can be utilized for initial, so we include it in our benchmarking assessment in the beginning, right at the time of admission also, so that right then you were talking about parent communication. Yes, it is very difficult. It is very tough for any parent to to agree about anything which is not necessarily positive about their child, because that's just natural, I suppose, to parenting. But as a school, whether it is a special need scenario, whether it is a case of a child being a little too aggressive or a child being a victim of some kind of bullying, either way, we have to prepare parents for this. And as you said, even digital citizenship, despite a school doing whatever it can, there has to be a component of parents also engaging and doing certain things
Absolutely.
at their end. So this communication has to be very, very free and at multiple levels. So right at the brink, at the beginning of the session only, at the time of admission only, we start preparing them for this, and we make them understand what is the need of all the layers that Dr. Parikh just mentioned a while ago. Now, the layers where he mentioned the peer, most schools have the policy bit. Most schools do not do the benchmarking assessment or use the test batteries that actually measure the child's emotional intelligence or
Yeah.
resilience quotient for that matter. But these are critical. These are important today more than ever before. And
Sure.
the pandemic has made children such somehow, maybe all of us, maybe adults too, such that, very little things, very simple things that earlier wouldn't normally hurt a child, today do. So the reaction is much more aggressive or much more distressful to very, very simple everyday aspects, which is why the peace table, which is why we also have something called the sunshine brigade. I mean, like sir mentioned, peers are critical and they will spread. So we have a whole, like you call it squad, but squad gives a little bit of a different feel to it. So we call it the sunshine brigade. These children, their job is only to spread sunshine. They're
Nice.
emotionally more stable. They tend to be more proactive in their reactions, and they're able to understand others much better. They reflect some such good interpersonal skills and self-awareness skills or relationship building skills. There are some children in every class who display more of these skills, and because we test them using various frameworks, we also get to know good data around it. So when these children are part of the sunshine brigade, they are there, anyone can approach them. Sometimes a child doesn't want to approach a teacher directly or maybe a monitor or somebody directly, but may not want to get to the peace table despite whatever we try to spread in the culture, but does feel free to talk to a peer. So that sometimes works, and in fact, it often does. So therefore, we have that. Then every lesson, irrespective of what they are learning, is about, we call it dirt, or dedicated improvement and reflection time, which means that they think about whatever we learned today, okay, whatever happened, what can I make better out of this? It gives them some time to think. Very often, it may be in an English lesson, it may be in a mathematics lesson, it may not be to do with some bullying incident that happened with a particular child. But the minute that child starts thinking and reflecting, they then come up with, I connected this and this. One of the things that Dr. Parikh said, I think the central word is being non judgmental. When
Yeah.
that child finally approaches either a parent or a peer or a teacher, anybody, or a counselor, I think what is extremely critical is for us to be non judgmental. We all, in our own ways, uh, tend to be very judgmental very quickly. Very often, I have noticed when I just let the child speak, discuss, rethink, there is their opportunity to think about what happened. It wasn't a big deal. I don't know why I reacted. I don't know why I did that. So when they get a chance to really think about it, I think it's that amygdala hijack that happens. The reptile brain takes over. Dr. Parikh will be better to say all that. I'm not the expert here, but the minute they get that opportunity to think it through, they themselves find that, okay, I could have dealt with it. I could have done better.
Sure. Sure.
So
I
that,
really like what's coming out, in terms of a sunshine brigade, a buddy program, a peace table. I'm sure schools are doing multiple things in their own way to prevent bullying. Yeah, of course, a lot needs to be done. It's not something that can be eradicated, but definitely, there is some learning for a lot of schools that are watching here. Dr. Roy, parenting practices may make a difference in whether children become aggressive or loud, victimized or scared. Is having an authoritative parenting style the effective way to raise children, in your opinion, since you are a parent to much older kids?
Yeah. I just wanted to make two other points which I was not able to make earlier related to the discussion. One is that, as Dr. Vora said, we are often, as parents and teachers, so judgmental ourselves that we are often the first point of contact for help, and we are the ones who completely throw the entire curve ball out of the park. Okay, and the child hesitates henceforth to ever approach either the parent or the child. So it is in these cases that you feel that you definitely need some training for both parents as well as children in terms of how to deal with bullying and its different responses. Very often I have found counselors and teachers not helpful at all. I'm very sad to say that I am a teacher, I know, but I am still taking the onus on myself that we are, after all, as Dr. Parikh and others have said, we are part of the milieu. And God knows whether we had a wrong day or a block of judgment or something, we are often, the people who aggravate bullying instead of controlling it or containing it. Yeah. Second thing, I really am appreciative of my friends Maushimi Dutt and Gautami Dutt, who together with myself approached Hindustan Times for this bully to buddy program. And when Dr. Parikh said that these are already initiated and policies are in place, I really feel encouraged, because I feel also that it is the child who can make the difference. It is time for the child to own it and to say that, yes, there is a system of bullying which takes place. It's very organized, very systematic, and we need to resist it ourselves. So I think the slightly older child and the slightly more enabled child has a big role to play. And we often undermine the power that a child has over his peers. And this should be definitely the this should spearhead one of the more lasting and more more important programs that you can institute in a school and in other institutions. Third thing about the parenting, yes, authoritative parenting is very often misunderstood as being very, as you rightly said, bullying and in a way coercive and authoritarian. Okay, authoritative parenting can just be drawing of fine boundaries, okay, with empathy, with concern rather than with aggressive helicoptering. And authoritative parenting can be In today's terms, I think they were rephrasing the terminology and calling it gentle parenting and positive parenting. Okay, where you do draw the lines, but you also follow them. Okay, you don't cross the lines. You are sensitive to the child's responses. Like supposing a child is scribbling on the wall. Why does this child scribble? You want to know. The child might tell you, but mommy, I don't have this much of space. So I thought that this was a good place for me to draw. That may be a very small child. However, a slightly older child, maybe non-neurotypical, that child might, draw crazy things because he's aggressive, because he's angry. You need to be also a detective. As a parent, your role as a detective does not end. You have to find out, observe, listen, as Dr. Parikh said, watch, and then respond as to why such a behavior is happening and what remedy you can take. I'm not giving solutions here, but I'm just saying that
Yeah,
these are
sure.
some of the ways in which we can approach
There
parents.
is, Dr. Roy, there is, of course, all of us know, all of us are parents. There is no perfect style of parenting.
Yeah,
That's very
no, no,
subjective in nature. So,
definitely.
parents, but of course, we do agree, parents with positive parenting presence are likely to raise confident kids
Yeah.
who can slightly better handle certain situations. But there's one point I would like to, mention here. Um, I'm sorry to hear that your experience with all teachers and school counselors might not have been the best, but
Not
it
all,
might have been
not
some
all.
odd
One or
experiences.
two.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
yes,
it,
yes. I
it
agree.
came across like a statement that, they're probably not best equipped, but we've also we hear of cases where
Of course.
teachers and counselors within schools are also, taking the pain of, really taking care of students and hearing them out and resolving these issues. So these are
Right.
different cases.
Definitely.
My last question to you, Dr. Parikh, because before we take one or two audience questions that we have, in conclusion, it can be said that a lot remains to be done. Of course, we know while schools are doing actually a lot, as we hear also, it needs to be done to curb cases of bullying, and there needs to be a concerted effort by society at large to eradicate this too. Yeah. What message would you like to give to students, parents, authorities, and schools here?
Children reflect who we are. They live in the environment who we are. School is within the larger environment of the society. School's not on some other planet.
Right.
Children spend more hours, more productive hours, probably the most formative hours at school. Yes. But they are not only exposed to the school. In modern day times, with the digital interface becoming so accessible and intrusive, so as to say, there is so much else exposure which is also happening. Role modeling by parents is important, but right kind of role model behavior by the role models of young people is also exceptionally important. Conversations that young people are exposed to. Now, conversation is not merely of a teacher in a class. It may also be a conversation on a news channel. It could also be something that you observed on the road. These are all real observations as well. So you can't create a system where schools talk about what seems like planet Jupiter and out there is Earth.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Bullying has to end, probably won't ever in its totality. But what are we doing? Are we sensitive enough to the impact of bullying? Is a question to be asked. Yes, there are mental health outcomes, and when I talk to young people, I tell them bullying destroys lives. Now, whether the life was destroyed because of school dropout, because of relationship concerns, because of self not developing, because of mental health concerns, that's secondary. The primary thing is a life is impacted. You need to make the bully feel that. You need to make the role models feel that. And then you use the school environment, the strength of the teaching community, and the support of parents to instill this aspect in young people. Now, that's the approach. And I do feel, and you've all mentioned about digital, so let me put this. If you ask me, which would in today's time be one of the most important skills that need to be integrated in schools, it is media literacy to me. because media literacy is going to be the one big differentiator in the quality of life that will be out there in the future and which may not be several years away. Navigating through social conformity, peer pressure, pressure of followers and numbers and likes, the trolling and the negativity, fake information, fake identity that you talked about, the bots of the world, these so-called verses that are going to come in the world, which are not going to be, which are also going to be virtual, and so on and so forth. Media literacy is integral to a young person's development. Having said that, bullying has various other components. All of them need to be done. And yes, bully to buddy, as we've been talking about, we need to do a lot more of work, concentrated effort for a decade, decade and a half, with a priority. My concern with her overall approach, and this is not a critique of schools, this is a critique of our society. My concern with schools, or our approach to schools, is in the perception and the importance we give to marks and grades. We don't even give an equal approach to, let's say, sports. Where poor mental health would be in the priority, I don't know. So all these conversations are fine, they help, dialogues matter. But what will matter is bringing that change, and the change cannot happen by the policy of the school alone. It happens in a collective approach when we collectively realize that well-being, happiness, positive life, skill set, good mental health is what we want for our children. In absence of that, we'll be just ticking the boxes here and there.
Very well said, Dr. Parekh, that that's true. It has to be a collaborative effort, towards making this possible. And it is going to take time, but yeah, as long as we can all start and make our contribution towards it. I'm afraid that'll be all. We have no time for questions also right now. We have been witnessing bullying for years now, as we see just in conclusion, and even with the stringent policies, we come across disappointing incidents. This shows that we have not been able to eradicate it completely, but we surely will be one day if we are vigilant and attentive and prevent it before it becomes ugly, frankly. Preventing and stopping bullying within a school setting involves a commitment to creating a safe environment where children can thrive socially and academically without being afraid. As a parent, you can teach your child how to deal with angry feelings, be caring of others, and how to be assertive without being aggressive in standing up for themselves, and I guess even for others as well. Don't be a bystander. Students need not be the targets of bullying to experience negative outcomes. Observing bullying is also associated with adverse mental health outcomes, and therefore, proper counseling from parents and schools, and if needed, from external counselors should definitely be sought. And in my last sentence, I will again reiterate, parents, if there is a need for counseling, an external counselor needs to be met with. It's no longer a stigma or a taboo. Please consult clinical psychologists if you see any signs of mental distress or situations which we as parents are not able to handle. We hope this discussion has been helpful to our student parents and schools. Thank you all for sparing time to join us today on this important discussions. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Rupali and the team of Hindustan Times. This has been an excellent opportunity to sensitize people around us about this issue. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupali. Thank you, Dr. Parekh.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bora.